Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Beyond the Wires. I'm your host, Tim Keller. Along with me is my fantastic co-host, Mr. Matt Disher. It's good to see you. I see you're wearing looks like a lined zip-up hoodie. I'm also in a hooded sweatshirt. It is that time of year in the Northeast, folks. And I mean, what did Cincinnati consider itself? Is that Midwest?
It is Midwest.
Okay.
I'll tell you, it's supposed to be like 45 degrees here today, but the rest of my house is warm. But my office has 3 exterior walls and some really big windows here, and it gets cold in here. And so I've got a little space heater, even over here. And this house is not old, but it's not drafty or anything like that. It's just too cold for my taste. So I'm wearing a Sherpa lined. I like to use the word Sherpa. Sherpa lined Old Navy sweatshirt that I've had for probably 15 years, and it's the warmest sweatshirt in the world.
Yeah, I also have a very similar problem. My office is off my garage, so the wall behind me is connected to the home. I'm sure that one's insulated pretty well. The exterior wall and the walls that touch the garage probably aren't insulated so well. There's a small baseboard heater in here, but to really get the heat jamming in here, I like to kick on a little space heater myself. I actually just turned that off right before we got started. Don't want to have that thing running in the background, but yeah. Other than it being cold, I kind of a ho-hum week here in PA. Anything new in your world?
Nothing new. Just watching the news, keeping an eye on what's going on with the COVID crises. I just read a story before we went live that said, I think Dr. Fauci is saying that basically nobody can hide from Omicron.
Yes.
So
it's coming for us all.
It's coming for us all. And here's the thing. Again, I'm not a doctor. I've said that I'm not claiming to be an expert by any means, but I have felt all along that this thing will continue to be prolonged the more we hide from it. And again, I somebody prove me wrong, but I do feel like mixture of vaccines and natural antibodies will probably be how we get beyond this sort of like lockdown, shutdown mentality. Every time a kid sneezes, they're sending everybody home from school. So I think it's getting old for a lot of people. We have to take proper precautions, but at the same time, there has to be a way past it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. With all the newly printed money over the past 18 months, we're seeing inflation hitting, some all-time highs. We need to kind of find ways to kickstart the economy back up. That's the economy is doing terrible. But it could definitely be doing better right now, and getting people back to work and feeling safe and all those things are of obviously the utmost importance. But
right. Some of the experts keep talking about that. We're in it for another financial or economic collapse or slump, and that could happen at the end of this year or it could happen in the next couple of years. But we ride high on an artificial economy. People are getting money that they didn't work for. People need to get back into work and things like that. There have been some other artificial injections of cash, and those things end up having, in probably most cases historically, a negative return. Again, I'm not a financial expert. We need to get Tim Kester back on the call to talk about those same things. But we got to get people back into work.
Yeah, I was texting with Mr. Kester over the weekend, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
His nephew just committed to Indiana University to play football for them. So congratulations to them. Shout out Tim Kester, TK. Hope you're listening today. Awesome.
If you don't know who we're talking about, Tim Kester has been a guest with us a handful of times, and he's in the financial services industry. Tim was, as he jokingly refers to, as being a target acquisition specialist in the U.S. Army. He was a sniper with a couple of deployments in and out of combat areas. But Tim's a great guy, and will shoot you straight. But he's come on the podcast and given us some financial advice and investment advice.
That is a fantastic nomenclature for that position.
It really is. Target acquisition specialist. He and I went to this group of kids. This was years ago. We got to go downtown Cincinnati as a group of kids that do this sort of summer day camp. Kids from certain neighborhoods where they might not have, they're disadvantaged in some cases. We went to this group and got to talk about military service with these kids and sit down with them for a couple of hours and have lunch and things like that. And going around the room, we realized there's a bunch of 5 to 10-year-olds in the room. And if we were to talk about what we really did in the military and call our jobs what we called them, that might be terrifying.
Yes.
To a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old. Although I found that a lot of them thought it was super cool. It was really cool to hear what we did. But that's how he referred to his job. because all the kids think of snipers as in the video games, you're hiding in the bushes with a big rifle and you're just shooting at everybody. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know local school district here has a Patriot program. Email came out last week. The lady that runs it, I actually reached out to her. Looking for some feedback here. I'd like to get involved. I'd like to spend some time, maybe talking with the kids, not only about military but post-military careerism, things like that. Tell them about all the skills you can get serving in the military, all the benefits that come with post-service, and how to handle some of those road bumps in that transition period.
I do that every year around Veterans Day. The local high school invites us to come talk to their students, and they rotate the history classes in and out of an auditorium where we talk about what military service looks like. And it gets, again, Tim Kester joins me every year, and the conversations get pretty intense because the kids will ask really good questions, and we tell them sometimes no question is off limits. So if we're talking combat, ask the question that's on your mind. And typically that question comes up, hey, have you seen combat? What was it like? Where were you? What happened? And things like that. And so you'll have sometimes we'll have the grandparents in there from Vietnam, the Vietnam era, and they'll talk about how they're in the bush fighting the enemy for years at a time. And that gets pretty intense for some of those kids. But I think for the younger generation of veterans, it's better for students to hear from the younger generation of veterans. So it's not a bunch of people that served in the military, not to take anything away from them, but served in the military 50 years ago versus somebody who served in the military 3 years ago and is not too much older than the high school student considering military service now.
There's a chance that they may be going to school with that person's younger brother or sister.
Right.
You know, they can see themselves in that person's shoes 5 years down the line.
Yep.
It's a lot easier. Frankie just chimed in off of LinkedIn. He just wanted to say, thank God he was vaxxed and boosted, just recovered from Omicron. If he wasn't vaxxed, he thinks he probably would have been much worse. He was down and out for almost 2 weeks. So Frankie, first off, thank you very much for checking in. Secondly, great to hear that you've recovered. Hopefully you're back to 100% and there's no lingering side effects from it. So always good to hear the positive news.
It is. I'm talking to so many people right now. And fortunately, I say fortunately, 6 months ago, people were getting Delta, and Delta seemed to be really bad. People were down and out. So fortunately, I'm seeing a lot more people who they're saying that the symptoms are fairly mild. They're still off. They still have some of these unique, odd symptoms. They're not losing taste and smell as much anymore, which is a really good thing. But the fatigue, that was it for me. That sounds like another common side effect right now, fatigue. I recall during my Delta experience not being able to stay awake throughout the day. I'd have to go take naps a few times. So I didn't take any sick days. I would just work until I said, hey, I got to go take a 15-minute lay down. And that's what I do. So that, and again, losing taste and smell, and what I call a constant sunburn when I had not been in the sun. It was this really weird sensation across my back that felt like my skin was on fire.
Oh, wow.
But glad to hear, Frankie, thanks for chiming in. Glad to hear that you are in good shape.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get in some news. We got a bunch of news this week. Kind of some oddball news, though. There's not any hard-hitting stories out there, but we have some fun ones. And the first one we have pulled up is about Denmark's military. I'm sorry, Norway. Norway tells conscripts to return underwear after service. So as I was reading this article, I said to Matt, this sounds like some Marine Corps stuff to me. Like the Marine Corps gives you everything you possibly will need to live your day in and day out life while serving in the Marine Corps. Anything beyond that is up to you. And the photo they have, not the photo Matt's sharing here on the live stream, but the photo in the article, I absolutely love it because it is a PFC. I'm sorry, it's a Lance Corporal in the United States Marine Corps, and he's holding a Norwegian flag as we had the defense minister of Norway come to the Pentagon back in March of 2018. And the flag is flying directly in the face of an airman. It's fantastic.
I think I might pull that one up. Let's see. I'm going to drag it onto the screen here.
Yeah. Good on the airmen for showing some discipline and,
there it is,
flailing around. But yeah, the flag flying right in the face of the airman. So, Norway is saying, based off of some issues with ordering, based off some supply chain issues, based off the pandemic, that they have now requested that underwear, bras, and socks be returned at the end of the military service so that the next group of recruits can use them. Now, obviously, they say there's a stringent cleaning and proper check process in place, so these garments can be considered adequate and sound for practice. So until recently, roughly 8,000 young men and women who every year do their military service returned their outer clothing, meaning their uniforms, their hats, their boots, things like that, but were allowed to leave the barracks with their underwear and socks that they were issued. So if you don't know, in Norway, there is it's mandatory military service, anywhere from 12 to 19 months. I'm assuming that's based off your job, or your MOS, as we like to call it over here. But after those 12 to 19 months are up, you could stay in, or you could go back to your regular civilian life. You were allowed to keep your undergarments. I think that's kind of par for the course. And now, not anymore. Not so fast. Norway is going to ask for those socks back. Assume there's no holes in them, wash them real good, and give them to the next guy.
I read this and I instantly thought, oh, they're talking about warming layers. Norway has some cold weather, so yes, that's normal. We had to return our warming layers when we, the long underwear, or the polypro,
the polypropylene base layer.
Now, I will tell you that when I dig through boxes in my basement, I still find that I have a few. I hope the Marine Corps supply people aren't listening. I don't know how I ended up with those. They just ended up in my stuff. This is the thing. You come out of the military, you go into the military. When you go to any new unit, you get issued packs and gear and your body armor and a weapon and different clothing items. But your personal clothing items are typically yours. You get a clothing allowance for those. You're not sharing those with anybody else, aside from a long underwear. And that's what I was thinking this was. I'm thinking, well, that's normal. This is long underwear. No. They're talking about undergarments.
Your skivvies.
And here's where I went with this. Socks and things. First of all, pretty strange to be wearing somebody else's underwear. But secondly, socks. I don't think I had a pair of socks that lasted any more than a month at a time anyway. And we were doing some pretty intense training, and that's probably, I don't know how intense their training is in Norway, but we were doing some pretty intense training where I was buying new socks probably once a month. I was buying 10 new pairs of socks once a month.
And I'll say, as a huge fan of new socks, one of the guilty pleasures in my life is every couple months I'll buy a new pack of socks, because that first time you slip on a sock, I don't know. It's something about that feel of a new sock for me, where if I enlisted, in this military and they're trying to give me use, I'm like, come on.
They're all faded and they're rough and they're, I love new socks also. I'm the same way, Tim. That's funny you say that. I also love a brand new sweatshirt. Before it's washed. It's super soft.
You slide it on and it's nice and soft and fuzzy inside.
Right. Ooh. But I can't imagine, and again, cultural differences here, right? So there were places that I visited in Southeast Asia where I'd get off the boat and there were people just cooking what looked like chicken on a stick, like a chicken kebab over an open flame on the pier. And that was normal. And we'd buy it and we'd eat it and we wouldn't think twice about it. You wouldn't see that necessarily here in the United States. So there are cultural differences, people sharing uniforms, people sharing, in this case, underwear, apparently.
Yeah.
But I know that other countries sometimes don't have the same sort of supply chain and funding. I mean, the United States has the largest Department of Defense or defense-funded organization in the world, larger than the next 11 or 15 countries put together. So we're in good shape there, and thusly we get what I would call a uniform allowance to go buy our own underwear and socks.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next article we have pulled up is Quantico rings up a $188 million bill for Afghan refugees that were housed in tents on the base. So thousands of Afghans briefly called Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia home after fleeing Taliban takeover back in August. So Matt has some of these tents pulled up, and I'll say I never slept in any tents that looked like that when I was in the Marine Corps. So they're not doing too daggone bad. But the last of those, go ahead.
I was going to say, by the way, I don't know if this actual photo here is of those tents. What I was trying to do was source a photo that would be representative of what we're talking about in this article. So they may
or may not be a true representation of what. But
we're talking millions of dollars toward tents to house thousands of people. So this very well could be. This is the image that came up, or these images are what came up when I searched for those.
Okay. Well, the last of those 3,755 refugees were resettled elsewhere in the U.S. just days before Christmas, leaving only an empty impromptu village of tents and barracks rooms on the base, and the $188 million bill for the Marine Corps and the Pentagon. There were actually, I want to say, 6 or 7 bases that had refugees living on base. Fort Lee and Fort Pickett in Virginia, Fort McCoy in Wisconsin, Fort Bliss in Texas, Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst in New Jersey, and Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, as well as Camp Atterbury in Indiana. There are still 5 active bases with Afghan refugees still living on them. As of the writing of this article earlier this week, 138 million of the 188 of that total cost by the Department of Defense has been paid back by Congress and signed by President Joe Biden, according to the DoD Inspector General. But that is quite the hefty bill to rack up. I mean, obviously this was back in August. We're talking about 4 or 5 months now that these refugees have been living on these military installations. So I'm glad these individuals are starting to start the process of finding their forever homes, hopefully, within this great nation. But yeah, that has to be a bit of a culture shock for sure, to go from a country like Afghanistan to all of a sudden you're living on a United States military installation.
Right. Well, and a lot of people have to understand what's happening here. So these are men and women who have served in line with the United States during the capacity of conflict over the last 20 years in Afghanistan. And so many of these people would not be alive had they not been able to jump on an airplane and head back to the United States. So they worked in hand with us. They were our allies. Some of the powers that be, the Taliban, or any other extreme groups in Afghanistan would be frowning upon their service to us. And so we had to do the right thing and bring them back and offer them refuge from those different entities that would wish them harm. The problem is when you're bringing back thousands of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and resettling their families, as you saw from those photos, these are typically probably not people with, it's not just an individual coming in, it's people with children. In both of these photos, you see people with children, multiple children.
Families.
And they have different needs. Yeah, right. So this is the other thing. You can't just bring back the interpreter that worked alongside of the Marines or the soldiers in Afghanistan, because what happens when you leave there, and this is typical of dictatorships and things like that, when if the one person who is the target defects, well, then they go after your family. And you know that. So we did the right thing, or we tried to do the right thing by bringing folks back and offering them some refuge and some housing to set up shop here. These are the best and brightest, in many cases, that Afghanistan has to offer. So these are people who worked alongside in the intelligence community with the United States military. These are engineers, these are teachers, these are doctors, these are people that have been doing that work. And whether or not I don't think they were forced to do it, but sometimes they volunteered. A doctor, for example, in Afghanistan saying, hey, I have to work with you guys because it's my oath. It's the work that I do. I have to work with you. Well, again, if the bad guy down the street disagrees, well, that doctor now has nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And his family has nowhere to go, or her family has nowhere to go. So these men and women, we're trying to resettle them, trying to offer them opportunities for housing, trying to plug them back into jobs. I've had these conversations myself, trying to have these conversations around what happens next. How do we plug them into jobs? How do we get them work visas? How do we get them to be viewed as in a labor market right now that is really hard to be viewed as assets? These are people that we can use in the workforce. We need people in the workforce right now.
Absolutely.
It's a topic of every headline. So that's where this is all going. This is just a little piece. This little tent city is just one little piece of this on a large scale.
Yeah, this article's up on military.com, and it talks about how some of this funding was pushed back and forth between the two political parties, kind of fighting with each other over this. I didn't realize how big of a cost this does take, though. They're saying about $13.3 billion has already been approved for the resettlement efforts, and they're looking for another $7 billion. A Republican from Oklahoma said, we're looking at over $20 billion for these resettlement efforts, when a state the size of Oklahoma, which has about 4 million people in it, the entire state's budget for the year is only $8.83 billion. So it's a very, very pricey price tag to do this work and get these people resettled and get them started on their lives. But
this is part of the total cost of conflict and war. We're talking about trillions of dollars now, and I realize we're talking about people here, so there's nothing. I'm not taking away from that, but this is something that we got to think about in the future when we go to conflict, when we start banging the drums of war. We've got to consider the everlasting cost of this. This goes in line with the costs of VA and taking care of your service members thereafter as well.
Absolutely. And Matt, you found another article about another, star, essentially, someone that has found fame throughout their lives, has passed away. This time it was Sidney Poitier, dies at the age of 94. But what this article highlights, and what I did not know, is that Sidney Poitier once served in the Army. He is an Oscar winner. You see him there being awarded a medal by President Obama. He's holding his Oscar there in the other photo you have. And it's quite an in-depth article. So, I mean, I'm not even going to attempt to try to start down the article, but it gives great highlights of his stage work, his film work, his triumphs, his tribulations coming up as a young man in this country. But Sidney Poitier was born to Bohemian parents from the Bahamas. They were, I want to say, said they were tomato farmers. They just happened to be over in Miami to make a delivery when Sidney decided it was time to come out and meet the world. His mother gave birth in Miami. Shortly after being sent to Miami, lived full-time with his brother. He moved north to New York, Harlem specifically. And anyone that's been in the Northeast during the wintertime knows it's cold, but imagine growing up in the Bahamas and now you're spending your first winter in the Northeast in New York City.
Right.
So in Poitier's first winter in Harlem, he was so overwhelmed that he decided he was going to enlist in the Army. Because you know what? They give out free socks and underwear and uniforms and all those
warming
things.
layers.
Yes. And they haven't been worn by anybody else at the time anyways. But at the time, Mr. Poitier was only 16 years old. He lied to get into the Army. He swore that he was 18 when he was yet to even turn 17. He was assigned to a medical hospital on Long Island where he talked about some of the things he saw working in this hospital in a 1980 biography called This Life. He says he escaped from the Army by feigning insanity. Obviously, if he was good enough to fool the Army, it was a stepping stone on his way to acting and becoming an Oscar-winning actor. But yeah, an absolutely fantastic actor. The article talks about how the first time he went to an acting, an acting school, he was walked out of the building. Like, this is not for you. You need to, go find a job being a janitor or whatever. He just kept coming back, kept trying it. He kept working on his accent and learning how to speak and spell and all of those things. And, he was a man that just did not give up, and he lived one hell of a life.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of research on him, and it said something along the lines of like his peak was in the middle to late 60s, where he played roles that were otherwise not headlined by African Americans at the time. And so he was one of these trailblazers who started getting key appearances and leading parts inside of films. And some of these parts were parts that typically were not occupied by Black men. And so he was a trailblazer in that regard, hitting his peak there in the late 70s, and then had a long career thereafter, being featured in a number of different films, a number of different big headline blockbusters. And he is a household name. I largely did not hear news about his passing until I was just looking up some news today. And it looks like he won a presidential medal there as well, which I featured that photo there. But this is a gentleman, I've heard his name, I've seen some of his movies, and man, I'll tell you, I don't know if it's just me. I'm paying attention to the media lately, but we've lost some good ones lately, and some of these are good ones who also happen to serve in the military, which makes them relevant to our conversations here.
Yeah, absolutely. So rest in peace to Sidney Poitier. The next article we have up here, and this one's right in line with your line of work there, Matt, but Jackie Eckhart is the excuse me. She is the military.com's transition master coach. Wrote an article here that says transition masterclass, find the best employers for veterans, and then in parentheses, you don't already know about. So Jackie starts off in the article talking about when veterans come out of the military, they're not just looking for a good job or a good start in the civilian world. They're looking for the best job and the best employer and the best pay and the most impressive and fulfilling jobs on the planet. And they always say, what company is it? Is it Amazon? Is it Cintas? Is it Cushman & Wakefield? Is it whoever? And the reality is, it kind of comes down to who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably the biggest piece of this is culture. The article highlights a tip that I know in the past, I've not done this myself, but it talks about doing research on companies before you start applying, not reading kind of the job description and go, that sounds like it'd be something for me. I'll go ahead and apply, and then doing the research on the company. Do it the other way around. Find companies that you really would love to be a part of, and then start looking to see what you can do to help that company out.
There are a million. I'm being facetious when I say this.
Thousands.
Yeah, right. I always, it's kind of like saying, oh, there's a ton of people in there. There are a million companies out here, right? And I've mentioned this multiple times in our show here. When I left the Marine Corps, one of the only options I thought I had, one of the only organizations that came knocking was the California Highway Patrol, which is a great organization. But in my mind, I was unaware of what other businesses were. And I very distinctly remember thinking to myself, once I got home from the Marine Corps, wondering, what do these companies do? So I'm in Cincinnati. Procter & Gamble is one of the largest organizations, or the Kroger Company, or American Family Insurance, or Cintas, or Luxottica. They're all headquartered here in Cincinnati. Macy's is headquartered here in Cincinnati. These are all companies. And of course, I know Macy's. I know Macy's has department stores, right? And I know that American Family Insurance sells insurance. Kroger is a grocery store. I didn't know what Procter & Gamble was. I didn't know that Procter & Gamble literally makes all the consumer products that you use to brush your hair, to brush your teeth, the things that you have in your bathroom.
Wash your body. Yeah.
Right. All
Dishes.
The consumer products that you're buying. And they have this distribution chain around the world. And that's what they do. They make the shampoos and the toothpastes. And therein, I never realized that all these companies also, it's not just about making shampoo and toothpaste. It's also about HR, IT, recruiting, operations, logistics. How do the products get from point A to point B? Get in the box in the first place? Who makes the label for the box? Right. All these different facets to these different businesses that I think we are sometimes, they're hidden from us in the armed forces. And we are very much aware of the consumer brands, the B2C companies, as I call them, business to consumer brands, the companies that are putting boxes on your front porch in the first 2 days that you order it, companies that are selling my Old Navy sweatshirt, companies that are making shoes, the companies that are where I can go buy a lawnmower or lawn and garden stuff. Those are consumer brands. But there are a ton of other companies behind the scenes that are what I call either B2B companies, or they are the logistics behind the scenes, or something along those lines. And this is a constant struggle in my own work. It is trying to get people to understand, or trying to get the service member to know that there are these other opportunities out there that don't necessarily have anything to do with where you buy a lawnmower or who delivers a package to your door in 2 days. Those are great products and services, don't get me wrong, but there are a million other options out here. So the point of this article, a lot of times you might be aware of the hardware store down the street, and you're like, man, I really like hardware and I really like lawnmowers and I should go work in operations and retail. But that's because that's the only thing you know. It's the only thing you're aware of, because it's right in front of your face every time you turn the corner, where there are a bunch of other options. And understand also, as I mentioned before, even in those consumer brands behind the scenes, there are a bunch of options that don't necessarily mean you have to be selling the lawnmower. Yeah. Sometimes it's, how did the lawnmower get from manufacturer to the store? Yeah. Right. So
the lawnmower's got to get made, and then the lawnmower's got to make it from the manufacturer to the place where it's going to be sold.
Right.
So there's a couple different steps there, and each one of those steps has multiple different avenues and branches in itself. So yeah, definitely a lot of different options out there. Later on in the article, she talks about, obviously the federal government being one of the biggest hires of veterans that are leaving the military lifestyle. Other companies like Lockheed, Boeing, BAE, also big hires. Amazon, Blackstone also get mentioned in the in the article. But what we brought this article up for, and what we wanted to make sure everyone out there that's listening or viewing is aware of, there is a free transition masterclass, The Best Employers for Veterans You Don't Already Know. It's going on Thursday, January 27th at 4 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up on military.com for this free employment masterclass. It goes over things you can expect to learn. And, it's just going to be from very knowledgeable individuals on the transition process, what to expect during your transition, and some pointers to help you transition as smoothly as possible. It's a great value add for anybody that finds themselves seeking a job right now.
And I'd say if you're transitioning out of the armed forces, or even if you're not transitioning out of the armed forces, understand that there are tons of resources out here that we didn't have 10, 20 years ago. So take advantage of those resources, and don't sit there and say, hey, I'm going to figure it out myself, or what you're going to do is find yourself later on. And I was a victim of this. I was a product of this. I didn't take advantage of all the resources that I could have tapped into, and thusly it caused me a lot of pain and heartache trying to figure out where I was going. And it's part of the reason why I do the work that I do today, and why we're even having this conversation in general, is to share some of these things. But use these resources, military or not. If you're tuning in and you're not military or you're not a veteran, use these resources, because all of the advice that's given here, if it's good for the military, it's good for everybody else. So use it, tap into these resources, resume building, interviewing, networking, all that stuff is applicable to literally anyone.
Absolutely. We're going to come off of military.com and go over Military Times for our next couple articles here. But the first one, we talked about North Korea firing a ballistic missile into the sea last week. It appears that they've launched a second missile within the same week. South Korea and Japan have both said that something was fired into the Eastern Sea there off the shores of North Korea. South Korea is saying that it was a ballistic missile. Japan has yet to, want to draw that hard line in the sand and say that that is exactly what was fired. And then North Korea, not related to this article, but has said that they have launched a supersonic missile as well. So, North Korea continues to just push the boundaries little by little.
Interesting times. We talked about this last week, and I'm
sorry, not supersonic, hypersonic, which
is
super better. Sounds better,
right? Super does. We all know supersonic is faster than the speed of sound. What exactly is hypersonic then?
I don't know the difference between super and hypersonic, honestly.
More than that?
I am going to Google that right now.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, this ongoing conflict, we talked about it a little bit last week, where I said, I wonder how much of this is us pushing each other's buttons, right? We're trying to become a world community, and some of the countries aren't playing along to the tune of our fiddle. And sometimes that might be maybe a problem that we need to deal with and say, hey, what's really the issue here? Or can we just ignore them? And I realize when they're firing missiles out into the ocean and we have allies nearby, there's obviously an issue there. A lot of it's just taking care of our allies that we've formed alliances with over the years.
Okay, so according to Google, popularmechanics.com has hypersonic is obviously supersonic on steroids. While supersonic has the clear-cut definition of being faster than the speed of sound, Mach 1 as it's known, hypersonic is a little fuzzier. It doesn't give me what a speed would be for hypersonic, but hypersonic is the superior sonic.
It sounds like it is. It sounds like if you asked a 10-year-old what's hypersonic, they're like more faster.
Fastest of fast.
More faster. Or,
I guess you got new shoes. Does that make you go hypersonic? Yeah.
That's the question I ask.
Hypersonic shoes.
Every kid when they get new shoes or when they have a birthday, do you feel stronger and faster?
Do they make you jump higher? Yes.
Right. Of course they do. Of course.
Don't.
Hey, by the way, did we miss the rat sniffing, the mine-sniffing rat?
We've got it. Reshuffled them.
Okay. All right.
Don't worry. We're getting into the rat.
I wanted to make sure that we were going to talk about the rats.
Well, we're definitely
on the topic of unusual topics.
Yes. So we had the North Korea article. It wasn't going to be anything we were going to go in depth on because we kind of went in depth last week, but just wanted to touch on it, put it back out there, let people know we're still following along. But as Matt kind of alluded to here, a rat who detected landmines in Cambodia dies in retirement. So I'm sure Matt has some photos to pull up here, but this is an undated. So the picture in the top left there, you see him almost like bowing, like a sensei up there on top of a block of wood. Um, is the rat named Magawa. He is photographed wearing his PDSA gold medal. So congratulations to him on being a gold medal winner. Is the animal equivalent of the George Cross. This animal is it says it here in the article, it is an African, an African giant poached rat is what this is. Apparently these rats can be trained to not only find landmines, but sniff out tuberculosis as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a nonprofit, APOPO. They are a Belgium headquartered nonprofit group. They train rats and dogs to find both these landmines as well as sniff out tuberculosis. And apparently this rat has spent most of its life over in Cambodia after being, trained to do its job, going out to these fields. If you're not aware, Cambodia is one of I'd say a handful of countries out there that just has been stricken with landmines being buried, conflicts end, and the two militaries leave, but all these landmines are left in the ground. So for years and generations now, people continue to find themselves being victims of these landmines, stepping on them, having them go off, mistakes, things like that.
Yeah, there was a period of time where there were the Soviet era. I went to, of course, Tim, we probably have unique knowledge of landmines, but going through some of these landmine classes, I know that sounds really funny, but we actually did have formal training on how landmines work and what different landmines are out there. There are the Soviet era or Soviet bloc landmines, or like scatter mines. They would drop out of airplanes and they could just drop tons of landmines, small toe poppers, anti-personnel mines. So toe popper is a small one that lands on the ground, somebody steps on it, it just takes off part of your foot.
Yeah.
It makes you a casualty that you have to be carried out. So for every one person that goes down, you have two more occupying trying to get that person out. So it creates victims, not deaths necessarily. And then you had some of the larger anti-personnel mines, like the ones that they called bouncing betties, or the ones that you'd step on a little prong sticking out of the ground that somebody manually buried. This thing would pop up and explode and kill everybody around it. These things are littered throughout the forests. They're littered throughout some of these different countries, any of these places where there have been conflicts for years. As Tim mentioned, people continue to step on these and find these by accident. You can see in these pictures, you have people wearing explosive protective suits, and something that's probably intimate to us in the bottom left is the old devil dog with the minesweeper or the mine detector. It's a pretty scary job if you think about it, because I'll be quite frank, the suits and protective gear that these people are wearing, if they were to run into an anti-personnel, or even worse, an anti-tank mine or anti-vehicular mine, the protection's not going to protect them.
No.
That's that, right?
Best case scenario, it leaves some of those limbs intact so they can be identified at least.
Right.
Life is over.
This was why they always told us we had a dog tag around our neck and a dog tag in our bootlaces, in case you were separated from your body parts. And so what you have here are some of these anti-personnel mines that take a certain amount of pressure to detonate, and even better, I say better for the person who steps on it, an anti-vehicular landmine might take 300 or 400 or 500 pounds of pressure to detonate, but even a small child could detonate an anti-personnel mine or a toe popper. A rat, however, can sniff it out. And bear in mind, people might say, "Oh, hey, why not use a dog that can sniff it out?" Well, a dog will set these off too. A dog can tip the prong on an anti-personnel landmine or a toe popper. So these were cheap little landmines that like I said, they'd scatter out of an airplane or throw into an area. When we did landmines, which we didn't, in practice, we didn't use landmines very often in real world practices. We had to learn them, but we didn't use them. But when we would put up a hasty protective minefield or anti-personnel or anti-vehicular mines, we would have to map them out with like GPS coordinates and map coordinates so that you could go find them and dig them back up. Some of these conflicting forces were just throwing these things out there. So you've got these little rats that are able to find them in the ground.
Yeah. I had never knew this was, I had known that dogs could be trained to do this. I didn't know rats could be trained to do this, but Magawa was born in 2013 in Tanzania in Africa. He was trained and then sent to Cambodia in 2016. So he spent over 5 years there in Cambodia, helping find these landmines and things like that. His contribution allows communities in Cambodia to live, work, and play without fear of losing life or limb. I know I've seen videos and photos of, 10, 12-year-old boys, girls walking around with, those wooden crutches because they've lost a limb running through a field playing. And they were one of the unlucky few that stepped on one of these mines and lost a limb. In 2020, the rat won a gold medal from the Britain-based People's Dispensary for Sick Animals, considered the highest award for gallantry an animal can receive. So a very highly decorated rat.
I think it's awesome. I saw a show the other day, or a story about a dog who was a mayor, a golden retriever in a city. I love seeing stories about animals.
Was that in West Virginia somewhere?
It might be. I think it is somewhere in the Midwest.
I think I've heard of this town. This dog's been a long-running mayor, as a matter of fact.
He's a golden retriever, and he probably does a better job than some of the politicians might.
So they give him two options, and two bowls of food, but whichever one puts his nose in first.
Yeah, they bring him out, and he greets people. But I mean, this really is this mine thing. You don't hear about this too often, and people might say, well, I mean, wouldn't we have the roads and paths cleared out? Yeah, sure. But when you go running through the woods and you've got 50 landmines still buried in the ground, I mean, think about this. We're still digging explosives and bombs out of beaches and out of the shoreline in France from World War II.
Yeah.
So imagine you dumped a bunch of plastic mines. Plastic takes a lot longer to degrade, if it ever does. You've dumped a bunch of plastic mines or metal and plastic mines, or some of these guys are crafty and they started building wood mines that could be harder to detect via metal detectors or mine detectors. So you've dumped 1,000 of these into the woods, and some kid goes running around out there playing one day, and it's the 1 in a million chance. Like, you might as well play the lottery that you step on one of these things that's been buried there for 60 years, let's say 70 years. But that's what's happening here, and it's virtually impossible for humans to do it. I know, Tim, we've talked about virtual reality and robots on our show before. I do wonder if in the future, or if they're already thinking about this, they can apply robotics and AI to figuring out how to solve this problem.
Yeah. Because you have these places that were, in conflict for 20, 30 plus years. And then once the conflict's over and both militaries kind of stand down, these scraps of war are left behind, and, the citizens that are now trying to move on with their lives are the ones suffering because of it. Magawa has detected over 100 landmines and other explosives during his 5-year career before retiring last year. In retirement in Cambodia's northwestern province, Magawa was housed in his usual cage and fed the same food, which was mostly fresh fruit and vegetables that sustained him during his active career. To keep him trim, he was released for 20 to 30 minutes a day into a larger facility with such things as sandbox and running wheel. His death at 8 years of age is not unusual for the species. So, I can't believe I'm getting ready to say this, but rest in peace, Magawa the rat. I learned something today. I feel good about it.
It's an interesting story.
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. And then our last article of the day, and this is a fantastic article. I would ask all of you that listen to this to go check this article out for yourselves. This one's back on military.com. The title reads 5 Ways for Veterans to Grow Self-Confidence at Work. So during a recent mentoring call with a Marine who had left active duty 5 years ago, he shared, I feel like when I was in the military, I knew exactly what to do and how to do it very well. Today, I struggle with understanding what I do well, where to go for help, and why they even hired me. I think everyone on this planet at times suffers from, self-doubt and things of that nature. But this talks about how to find that confidence, not only in yourself, but your abilities and your qualities, and how you can translate and promote them in the workspace, and how to communicate that with your coworkers, other leaders around you, and superiors, so they can hopefully continue to push you in the right direction and, find out what other skills and competencies you may have. So let's go with number 1, inventory your success. And this is not something I do, but based off this article, it's probably something I'll start to, begin to do. Obviously, any sort of classes or certifications I pass, and I get, things I can put in plaques and hang them up on the wall. I keep those sort of things, but it goes a little bit beyond that. So inventorying your success. This individual says, do you keep a kudo file? Because I do. In fact, I have a physical one for all the accolades I receive in the form of letters, note cards, and he has a digital one that he keeps, as a separate folder in his email files. So when he gets an email from somebody saying, hey, heck of a job of securing that sale, that's going to be a major account for us going forward. Love to see it. Love the work you're doing. Keep pushing forward. He's going to, slide that one down into his little kudos file there on his email. And so when you start having those moments, you have a couple of days where you're just not able to land those sales. Man, I'm just not good at this job. You can go back to that file in your email folder, read through a couple of, I'm not that bad at this. I'm just on a bad streak. You got that physical file in your cabinet drawer there. You can slide open the cabinet, take a look at some of the accolades you've received. It's a great kudos file.
And I'll take a step further than this, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be the kudos file. You have to bear in mind that there are things you're doing on a day-to-day basis in any job that might be things that you need to reflect on at the end of the year, come time for a performance evaluation, or just anytime you want to brag a little bit about what you've done. And I use the word brag because I have in my own career been positively criticized about this. In other words, I've had bosses tell me, like, Matt, you need to take more credit for the things that you're doing. Here's what happens in some jobs. You're doing 15 things a day, but 10 of those things might not be necessarily in your job description. Mm-hmm. They are things that you're just taking care of, like questions and answers and emails, and you're solving little problems and stuff like that. And it's very easy to overlook those things. And when it comes time for performance, you forget that you've done those. Another characteristic or a trait of people who serve in the military is we tend to talk about the we versus the I. Mm-hmm. We did this, the team did that, the squad executed, blah, blah, blah. And so sometimes what we forget to do is, what I forget to do, I say we again, what I forget to do is to take credit for the things that I individually contributed to. And so this goes beyond the kudos file of, I got a note from somebody saying good job, or I used to get postcards a lot before the email day, or rather not before the email days. We've been using email forever, but before there were the times where it was a regular communication cadence. People would send me postcards and say, hey, appreciate you talking to me or whatever. But what you've got to do is also take inventory of the things that you're helping people with. I train people on systems. It's outside of my job description. One of the things that I do is I walk people through how to use different systems that we use as a business every single day. That's just one of the many things that I do outside of my regular job description. And it has a larger exponential impact. So you got to bear in mind, don't just keep the kudos file, keep the performance file too. Keep track of the little things you're doing on a day-to-day basis that you can talk about when you go in for an interview, or you talk to your boss about the things that you're doing well.
Mm-hmm. Number 2 here is Enlist Allies. So even at work, we need supporters, cheerleaders, and allies who will have our back and lift us up. You need people you can trust. You need people you can go to find support, or tell you, hey, give you some of those kudos maybe that you need to hear. I know that, again, when we were serving in the military, Matt, you're not going to get along greatly with everyone you serve with. But for the most part, you are part of a team. And when you see somebody else on that team succeeding or doing well at something, it's a success for all of us. And, we all did a good job of being cheerleaders for one another. If they were your best bud in the unit, or maybe they weren't the guy you got along with the best, at the end of the day, their success was your success along with everybody else. So this is a great way to keep some of that going, some of that, camaraderie you had in the military here in the civilian workforce.
Yeah. How do you enlist allies? How do you keep allies? One of the questions that I ask a lot of people I talk to is, how can I help you, or what can I do for you? And I don't ask it just for the sake of pretending like I want to help them or that I want to do something for them. What I find is it lets me into their world and the problems that they're challenged with, or the things that they're trying to accomplish on a day-to-day basis. And what I found is, especially the older I get, the more experience I have, I might have a solution or advice for them in terms of how I can help them. And I would tell you, the one little thing about doing one little thing for somebody, solving a simple problem that they have, or, hey, I in my world, it's recruitment. I really need a person in Phoenix, Arizona. Well, hey, let me help you with that. Let me spend 5 or 10 minutes and try to help you with that. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening is, if I contribute, or whether or not I contribute, but if I am in there trying to make a difference for that person, that person now becomes my ally. That person knows they can lean on me for things. They will give me, again, when I talk about performance reviews, they'll give me positive reviews because not only have I done my job well, I've also helped them to do their job better. So enlist those allies. Don't go in there. We all know this from the military. You're not. There's no such thing as a team of one, right?
Yeah.
So you're always working on a team, especially in a company. You are part of a greater organization. You have to work as such. And good managers, good leaders understand this. They understand how to enlist the allies. Sometimes you even have to direct resources, and you have to say, "Hey, can I have your help with this?" If people are willing to help you because you've helped them,
call them that favor.
Right. It is just directing resources, and it's delegating in some cases. Don't be afraid to do those things. Delegate your own responsibilities too. Rather, take delegation. Help other people accomplish their tasks. If you have a couple extra minutes, help them out. You'll create allies all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 3 is grow your skills. So it starts off saying, hey, remind yourself that when you showed up for your first day of basic training, you had no idea how to perform your military duties. And now today you're in a completely different job, company, and culture, and it requires skills and training you may not have. So while you were hired to do a specific function or task, consider upskilling in the areas that will build your confidence as well as your value to the company. I would also like to add to this that, remember, this is going to take time. Don't think you're going to go into that first civilian job and just be that rock star, be that, that meteor that's just flying out in space and everybody's gazing at you because you're that awesome. You might land a job and realize, man, this is a little harder than I thought it was going to be. It's going to take some time for me to actually get good at this. But for example, I would say that for me, it's being self-aware, taking that 5 to 10 minutes every day on the drive home and just saying, hey, what was good? What was bad? What could we have done different to make things better? It's a self-awareness thing. And based off that self-awareness, I know personally I have found things like working on soft skills, working on communication skills, things like how to manage better. And it's going to just push you and drive you. And you can then, man, I keep going back to this. Hey, I need to work on these soft skills on a pretty regular basis. Then you can start reaching out to, individuals, those allies we talked about, where you can look for, books or seminars or things on the internet of how to work on those soft skills and start applying some of those to yourself. It says talk about learning effective communication, how to manage up and across within an organization, executive presence, and other relevant soft skills can increase your confidence at work.
There are tons of books out there that talk about how to win friends and influence people. That's one right there. How to win friends and influence people. It's the name of the book. Go look for it. There are just tons of different. Simon Sinek writes a bunch of books about leadership and things like that. He's one of my favorites too, and he always has sort of a military theme. Although he's not military himself, he has sort of a military theme around how leaders can engage that sort of military theme to be better leaders. But at the end of the day, it comes down to how you craft an email. Simple things like that. How you communicate via email can mean the difference between people looking at you positively and wanting to engage with you, and people going, oh, this guy doesn't have time to write a decent email, and he just, the short, sweet answers. There are the different types of people. There are the extroverts and introverts, and there's the different types of leadership people that write out lengthy emails, and there's the people that respond with two letters. No, it's no explanation. All of those types of interactions, you have to be able to read your audience, read your room, read the culture of your organization. If you are not looking for ways to expand the way you communicate via email or in person, or how you talk to people, or how you do presentations, this is something I learned as a PFC in the Marine Corps, how to give a presentation without sounding like a fool. These are things that can exponentially promote you, promote yourself, promote your ability to lead, your ability to do more inside of a business. But you have to pursue those. You're not just going to get those by accident.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 4, check in with a mentor. So, a mentor could be someone in the company or someone outside the company. They may be someone you served with in the military. But if you have a mentor at work, discuss your concerns with them. Let them know the times and circumstances that lead you to question your competency and make you feel less confident. Since they work for the same organization, your mentor can hopefully help you navigate those situations and set yourself up for success. If your mentor is outside the company and is also prior military, you want them to remind you the many differences between the military and civilian business cultures work style, priorities, and more. Your mentor is further along on the path than you and can show you how your role and skills today will serve you as you continue to grow in your career.
I would say right alongside of networking. I always talk about networking being largely the most important thing you can do for the progression of your career. Right alongside of that is finding a mentor. And even if this is not somebody, it's not like you knock on somebody's door and say, hey, will you be my mentor? Although you can do that. And I have done that. I have learned so much about things that I didn't realize I didn't know by simply dropping in and asking people for advice. And this is the thing that I found. And I tell this to job seekers all the time. And we're not talking about job seeking here necessarily, but it works for job seeking and it works for simple mentorship to progress your own career. Don't ask people for the job. Don't ask them directly for any sort of help. Ask them for advice. Ask them how they got where they're going. Hey, I mean, I called one of my executives yesterday because I'm exploring creating something that we haven't done yet. And I kind of wanted to take a temperature on it. And I've asked 6 people about it, but I dropped in on this executive and I said, hey, I want to float something past you. I want your perspective on it. And it was probably one of the best 10-minute conversations I've had in the last 30 days. So, and this is the other thing. Sometimes they will ask you to challenge yourself. The other person you're talking to, that doesn't need to be an executive either. Sometimes these people might have a different perspective and they're thinking about this from a different angle, and they're going to ask you to think about it from a different angle. It's going to challenge you to think about it from a different angle, which will make you a better presenter. It'll make you a better leader, better manager. It'll make you a better person all around to be able to come into the business and say, hey, I'm not just seeing it from my selfish perspective. I'm seeing it from the perspectives of 6 other people who have now mentored me into this. And you can mentor up and you can mentor down. You can go to mentors who are senior to you. And you can also go to, as you get older, you might need a mentor who is now speaking the language, so to speak. I sound like, right, the new jive, right? So it's understanding. I used to work in an organization that would not use social media largely. We were underutilizing social media for anything we did. And this was a Fortune 500 company. We were underutilizing social media, and it was because the leadership didn't understand the value of social media. And they needed a 20 or 30 something to basically say, this is where everybody is. We need to use this. There are tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people on these platforms. So go in, find a mentor. If you find that you have a good connection with somebody, foster that connection and ask them, hey, can we talk once a month for an hour? Can we have lunch once a month? Matt,
you brought up a great point talking to 6 individuals on this, hopeful project you have working or budding up. You don't just have to have one mentor either. Find those individuals that have a skill set that you would like to build upon yourself. For me, I have one individual at work who I think is just fantastic with his people skills. When I have a people skills based type question, he's the guy I go to. Hey, this is kind of what I'm dealing with. Here's the scenario. This is how I handled it. I think I probably could have did it better. What's your perspective on this? I have individuals that I find are very good analytically, operationally. I can go to them with those sort of questions. I have, senior managers and executives that I can go to and say, hey, these are some things I'm seeing. This is the feedback I'm getting from the frontline workers. Here's their issues, their concerns. I'm going to present them to you. Let's talk these things out. Let's talk about this and see what we can get back. That way I can take that feedback back to those frontline workers. So, the people that I'm working with on a daily basis on the front lines, they know I'm active and, I'm showing the concern as well.
Right.
And number 5 here on this list is contribute or lead. This one's a great one because your first job, your first, step into the civilian workforce, you may not be hired to be a leader right away, and you may be hired to be more of a contributor. And it's understanding when it is time to lead and when it is time to contribute. If you're hired to be a contributor, there's going to be a time or two where as a team member, you may have to step up and take some leadership over a small group of other contributors to get a task done or on time or things of that nature. But the majority of your time is going to be spent contributing to the success of a team. Once you find yourself in a leadership role, not that you're not contributing to the success, but your job is more to step back and make sure that team has the tools and knowledge to get those contributions in place to find that success as a team.
Right. Yeah, this is one of those things I've told a lot of junior people this, or people who hold junior level positions, that you don't have to have a title to be a leader. You don't have to be listed as a manager or director or team leader to be a leader. If you look around a company, if you're on regular phone calls, a lot of us are on regular conference calls, where, especially these days, we're not sitting in meetings anymore. We're on phone calls. We hear challenges, gripes, complaints, things like that. One of my big things has always been, if you have a complaint, have a solution for that complaint. And what I tell the junior people is, when you hear the complaint and you hear the solution, think about how you would raise your hand and carry out that solution. So you could be the entry-level person coming in the door. Now, bear in mind, some companies, some managers might kind of hold you there because they don't want you to take on more than, bite off more than you can chew. But the thing is that you don't have to have the manager title to be leading in a position, to be a contributor in a position, or to be a contributor outside of your regular job description. So again, use those challenges when you hear complaints, when you hear things like, oh, we really need this, and this isn't working right. That person might be saying that, and they don't have time to fix it, or they don't have the capacity or knowledge to fix it, and you might. And so you have this ability to become a multi-role player, or an irreplaceable player rather, on your team, and that's a great place to be, especially if you're a junior coming up.
Yeah. But it's a fantastic article. It's probably about a 5-minute read over there on military.com. Again, the title of the article is 5 Ways for Veterans to Grow Self-Confidence at Work. We kind of gave you, the highlights of most of those bullet points there, but go in there, read it for yourself, read it in depth. It's a fantastic article. Sometimes I think I am a little overconfident, and, I'm like, yeah, I can do that. 10 minutes in, I'm like, shoot, how do you do this?
was it Warren Buffett or Steve Jobs? One of these guys said a number of years ago that if somebody approaches you for a job and you don't know how to do it, take the job and then learn how to do it. And of course, that doesn't work if you're a surgeon or a vehicle mechanic, like that. But
there's certain jobs you should probably get trained on first,
right? But you got to think about the operational jobs in your environment. If you already know something about how that works, and you already have information or knowledge on the organization, that's the other thing. Like, institutional knowledge goes a long way. You don't necessarily have to know the job 100%, but having knowledge about how to get the job done. And this is, again, back to being a leader and a contributor. Sometimes it's, who do I go to? Do I know who to go to? And the person right off the street, it's going to take them 6 months to figure out how to get, who do I go to, or where are my resources? Whereas the person that's been there for 5 years now, they might not know that job 100%. It might not be on their resume, but they have more institutional knowledge already than the person behind them. So,
and they're going to know those. Hey, if I have a question about this, I know I can go to Matt, because Matt's been around, 10 years.
What was it? Number 2 was Enlist Allies. This is where you enlist allies. If you've been spending your 10 years enlisting allies, or 5 years enlisting allies, again, back to the whole point, execution is not always having all the answers or you doing all the work. Sometimes it is delegation and using resources. It's using a solid leader knows how to implement other people effectively to get the job done.
There's knowledge and knowledge where to find. And sometimes it's not in a book; it might be in somebody else's head.
I'll use this from the military. If you take you take a general and a lance corporal, and you put a machine gun, a 240 Golf, in front of both of them, and you say, hey, put this machine gun back, take it apart, put it back together, and get it operational. I would guarantee you 180% of the time
that lance corporal's going to smoke him.
He's going to do it better. But here's the thing: the general knows how to place that lance corporal with his machine gun with combined arms. That's leadership. It's not about, you got to know all the ins and outs. It's good for a leader to understand the ins and outs.
The lance corporal has the knowledge of that one piece of the entire puzzle that the general is overlooking and overwatching and seeing, and he's able to strategically place all the pieces in the right order to make it all fit together.
That is strong leadership. That's what strong leadership is. That's how it's really defined.
Absolutely. So as you go along in your career, just keep on picking up more of those puzzle pieces and figuring out how they all go together. And then one day you'll be that general. And this one fits here, and this one fits here, and bam, bam, bam. There we go.
And follow us for more recipes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. More recipes and more rat news.
I think we're gonna keep talking about these types of things. We're looking for those topics, though. That the basis of this podcast really is what happens after the military, and this is good knowledge for people who are not in the military too. All the advice issued here is good for everybody. So
it's not military centric. Yeah,
absolutely. Come one, come all.
Yeah, and let's be honest. You could be in your first year outside of the military, your first year in your first regular job. And you'll probably have those moments where, man, I'm just not good at this. Or you could be 40 years into your career and be like, oh my golly, I'm just having a bad year.
Yeah.
You're half a month into January and you've made 0 sales and everybody else around you is 10 sales deep and you're like, I'm getting smoked. So
happens.
With that all being said, thank everyone so much for checking us out. You can check us out on all the major social media platforms, as well as podcasting platforms. We're out there, available wherever. Give us a like, rating, subscription, review. All of those things help us help you even more. We appreciate you guys for checking us out. And until next week, we'll be right back here on